Classic line.
No else matters. No one else matters. No one else matters. No one else matters.
No one else matters. A blanket statement that by all accounts should not be applicable, yet here we are. Prior to Undertale's 10-year anniversary, my mind raced with ideas of what would transpire. Believe it or not, I actually predicted this exact event, with one major difference. Susie was in place of Noelle. Out of the cavalcade of characters that have parallels to Deltarune, I am shocked to find out that the one which made an appearance was one who previously didn't. Noelle thus far has always been a Deltarune character, so it begs the question, why is Noelle the only person who matters? Hello again people, today we are talking about Noelle and why she carries so much narrative weight. Noelle is a fan favorite, and her arc thus far has been very endearing. No pun intended. We'll cover everything new about Noelle today, as well as the many plot details which surround her. Why is she the focal point of the weird route? Why is her family so obsessed with Christmas? Who is the knight? Noelle's involvement in the story has declined slightly in these new chapters. She's there, don't get me wrong, but all of her character moments were in Chapter 2, having since been labeled as a dream. To start things off, I prefer to talk about Noelle's guest appearance during the Undertale 10-year anniversary livestream. The Undertale 10-year anniversary livestream was initially going to get its own video, but due to events within, I think we'll talk about it now. Before the stream even started, it generated a lot of hype. People were already relating this stream to a similar one which happened in 2021. Where Toby and co played through Chapter 1 and then created one of the most hyped gamer moments in history by announcing the release of Chapter 2 at the end of the stream. During that stream, they played a slightly altered version of Chapter 1 where things were slightly different. This stream, on the other hand, took the changes to an entirely new extreme. How's everybody enjoying the stream? Wait. I'm gonna shut up. Whoa! Bookshelf, there are many books. They seem to have gathered from many different places. What the hell is going on? Yo. Huh. New sections, new music, new character moments. There was a lot of changes. A lot of people, myself included, thought this meant that there would be an update to Undertale releasing after the stream was done. Alas, this was just a thought. Nothing new came to Undertale officially, but we did see most of the new content release on the Undertale website. A large percentage of the new sprites and animations were uploaded here free to download, but a certain someone was missing. She was there. I'm not crazy, Tricky Tony. I know what I sawed. Noelle was there, and you can tell by my reaction that she was not supposed to be.
Keep exploring.
Yeah.
Like, you would have a save there, just like load up when you want to just like listen to music.
Darkness Falls is such a good track. I love Darkness Falls. It's pretty good. Ooh, guys, look behind the tree. Look behind the tree. I'm not kidding.
Glad that you like
Look
it
behind
so
the tree. Look behind the tree. They walked right by her. Oh my god. On the walk back, when the group is on the way to Azrael to say goodbye for the last time, they briefly stop near Noelle again, and this happens.
Got to talk to all these great politics guys. Actually, there's only one.
Classic line.
No else matters. No one else matters. No one else matters. No one else matters.
Toby briefly mentions this political bear NPC, but then he starts repeating himself. At first, he appears to make a typo with the text-to-speech. No else matters. Phonetically, this sounds like no, Noelle matters. I think this mistake was actually intentional. Yes, this could have just been a genuine mistake, but what was not a mistake is when he just started to repeat himself. saying that no one else matters over and over and over again. This was almost certainly a message to the community that Noelle carries with her a narrative weight that is much greater than we initially thought. Noelle is one of the main characters of Deltarune, don't get me wrong, but lately she has taken a back seat in the story, being kept in the dark on several major plot points. When it comes to the other route, however, we see a massive deviation. Noelle lies at the center of the weird route. But that's extra, isn't it? Why is Noelle the only one who matters if she only takes a narrative forefront in the weird route? We'll talk about that, but first, I think I need to address the elephant in the room.
Elephant green screen effect.
I mean, someone has to. Is this stream even canon? So, the changes made to Undertale during this stream were large. Not necessarily world-shattering, but not inconsequential. Towards the end of the stream, I believe Toby was reading the chat and realized that he may have been getting people's hopes up unintentionally. He directly addressed the changes and called this stream a what if.
A long nap after this is all over, so I don't think I'm interested.
But yeah, about all the extra stuff on the stream. Pretty much everything was smoke and mirrors, and we show you everything you can do with it. So if you had it, it would probably break instantly, so it's not very practical to share. The second reason is because I don't want it to actually be in the game. I like the game as it is now. About the new areas, it's basically just a what if. But this what if was always there.
A what if that was always there. That, combined with the fact that he outright says he likes Undertale the way it is now, makes it really hard to argue that any of this is actually canon. What does this mean for Noelle? Honestly, not a lot. Anything Deltarune related came before Undertale, so it only makes sense for Noelle to be an Undertale character too. What I think we really need to get to the bottom of is why is Noelle the only one that matters? This time around, I'm going to be skipping the recap for Noelle. If you want my thoughts on Chapter 1 and 2, just watch my original video. I will be referencing the previous chapters, I just don't want to pad this video for an extra 10 minutes with plot summary. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today, and I want to get right into it, so let's get started with Noelle's actions in the new chapters. Noelle is adjacent to almost every major story event. It seems like almost everyone she knows is involved in the conflict of light and dark without her knowing. She still remembers the events of Chapter 2, but discredits them as a dream. And can I just say something really quick? Hey, Susie, you really should have told Noelle the truth. Like, you have no business saying that you hate when people don't tell you the full story in Chapter 3 to then go on and let Noelle think that everything was a dream. Especially since you're the one who told her it was a dream in the first place. This seems to be a constant theme with people in Noelle's life, unfortunately. They see Noelle as this precious little thing that just can't think for herself and needs to be protected at all times. While I understand the merit of protecting people you care about, Noelle is her own person, and it really sucks that almost everyone around her doesn't value her agency. Like I mentioned, Noelle is kept in the dark in regards to almost everything, so as a result, she doesn't get a chance to knowingly do anything plot relevant in the new chapters. Even allowing Chris and Susie to explore her house was a decision fueled by her attraction to Susie. Susie and Chris are at the church doing their thing, while Noelle takes on a more formal role singing in the town choir. The people of Hometown seem to value the Deltarune religion greatly, and while you won't see the entire town congregate, a lot of big names can be seen here. Noelle's involvement in the town choir is most likely a result of her family's status. The Holidays are arguably the richest family here, so it makes optical sense for the daughter of that family to be involved in extracurricular activities. Despite this, the mayor is not here herself. Even if she was not a believer in the town's religion, you would think she'd be here to watch Noelle sing. Rudy is afflicted with a debilitating disease, and even he made an appearance. So why is Carol not here? This is really made to highlight the sense of detachment between Carol and her family. She is the mayor, and her work takes up all of her time. Perhaps the choir is another means that Noelle uses to avoid interactions with her mother. As far back as Chapter 1, we saw instances of Noelle taking measures to not interact with her mother. Relatively small character moments happen before you leave the church. If you compliment Noelle's singing, she will be shocked having never received a compliment from Chris in her life. She will respond, stating how she always enjoyed listening to them play the piano. The locked door option is actually a moment for Chris as well as Noelle. We don't know this yet, but Chris does not want us to find the shelter code. This actually highlights an interesting facet of Chris and their limited ability to speak to people while we are present. Obviously, we are limited by how much they don't want us to know, but also they intentionally try to limit the amount of information we can receive by sabotaging the questions. Locked door is referring to the locked shelter door, but Noelle doesn't know that, so Chris is just saying locked door, as to stop her from relaying any information that might be useful to us. Noelle offhandedly mentions how Chris would help Noelle break into her own room. With this, we see another instance of Chris withholding information. If Susie wasn't preoccupied sucking up all of the church juice, she would have overheard the fact that Chris knows how to break into the Holiday mansion undetected, thus not needing Noelle to be there when they snoop around. Noelle's dialogue picks up again when they actually get to the house. Well, actually, if you meet up with her and then leave to go on the lunch date with Susie, she will wait there and wonder where you went. Anyway, Birdley calls Noelle on the phone, asking her to go to the festival with him tomorrow, and despite her reluctance and Susie sitting right there, she says yes, with a frown. Thankfully, Susie steps in and tells Birdley to shove off, but after this scene, you can probably understand my frustration. Noelle rationalizing everything that happened in Chapter 2 as a dream has unfortunately caused her to fall back into her Player 2 status with Birdley. Lessons learned have been disregarded, and it really makes me sad because I felt like Noelle was making some progress there. There really isn't anything else to say. I felt like Noelle's character arc was going great, and it seems to have regressed slightly after Chapter 2. I'm certain she'll make a comeback, but it just feels a little depressing to theorize about where her character will go now. Things look even more grim if you take the weird route into account, which I'll talk about towards the end. When we find December's guitar, Chris rips us out and stuffs us inside a storage closet. They keep us there while they go snitch to Carol Holiday. When we return to December's room, Chris was there waiting for us. A melee ensues as they swatted us with a hockey stick, desperately trying to stop us from getting Susie and Noelle's attention. While we're there, Noelle and Susie have a lot more dialogue than I initially thought, which gives us more context as to how Noelle has rationalized Chapter 2's events. Every so often, Chris can be seen turning their head, reacting to what Noelle says. In this conversation, Noelle makes yet another reference to how differently Chris has been acting, obviously referring to us without knowing it. Our influence makes Chris act very differently than normal, and it seems as though only Noelle has bothered to take notice. To be fair, Chris spends most of their time with Susie and Rousey, two people they have only recently started interacting with. Susie pretty much disregards everything Noelle says, stating that that is how Chris normally acts. She does take the time to mention that Chris is really good at flirting for some reason, and if you look really closely you can tell that Chris starts to blush after she says that. Continuing from this, Susie noticed a picture of Noelle and Chris on the wall, most likely from a time of when they were younger. Naturally, Susie interprets the picture as both of them being closer in the past. However, Noelle simply disregards it as them being neighbors. When Susie points out that they are both sitting on a Ferris wheel together in the picture, Noelle uses the very interesting terminology of the picture being forced. Forced, as in they were forced to get on the Ferris wheel together and they were forced to take the picture together. Obviously, I could be reaching with this, but it could imply an underlying sense that their relationship was forced upon them by their parents. Obviously, I don't see a reason why Chris and Noelle would hate each other, but it just seems very interesting that Noelle would use the term forced when talking about an old childhood photo. Noelle explains further. This was the moment referenced in Chapter 2 where Chris and Noelle were riding on a Ferris wheel and Chris began to shake the car that they were in. Strangely, after Noelle says this, Chris kinda goes into this state. Like, they're kinda tired or they're exhausted. This could just be a gameplay failsafe, but I'm not sure. I think the most important thing to discern from this scene is that Noelle and Chris did have a previous history, but even Noelle isn't 100% sure what to think of that previous history. It's like, yes, they used to spend a lot of time together, but Noelle isn't really sure herself if that time together was genuine. Considering Chris's actions in Chapter 4, I am almost certain that Chris cares about Noelle and her safety. And of course, our influence stops them from being able to speak to Noelle directly. Considering Noelle has been the only one who is able to discern that Chris's behavior has changed recently, I think it's safe to say that there is a fundamental part of their relationship that still exists. Even though she hasn't made any big leaps forward in her own right, we have received more context as to why Noelle is the way she is. Judging by the overbearing motherly behavior from Queen and how Noelle responds to such behavior, many fans already guess that Noelle did not have the best relationship with her own mother. I can't say the way that Carol Holiday acted towards Noelle really surprised me as much as it solidified her as one of my least favorite characters of Deltarune so far. Coldness doesn't even begin to describe her. When she arrives, she disregards any semblance of hospitality. Susie, give me that guitar. Noelle, get in the kitchen. Asgore, take your food outside. Carol Holiday irradiates this sense of pure, unchecked authority, which naturally clashes with a rebellious character like Susie. She reprimands the servine, haha, got it right this time, and leaves. It really would have been interesting to see how Carol handles this situation with Noelle. I don't think she would have gone as far as to physically strike Noelle. It doesn't seem like she's that evil. All I will say is that Noelle is absolutely afraid of Carol. This is not the reaction of a healthy parent and child relationship. I'm sure we'll get more details regarding Carol Holiday's character and how she ended up the way she did, but for now, we have no choice but to tell it like it is. Just for a moment, I want to revisit a topic of Noelle that has been discussed for a long time, that of which being the feeling of comfort she gets when being afraid. I haven't done a disclaimer in a while, but they are important as I don't want people to get the wrong ideas. I am not an expert in child psychology, parenting, or the development of mental health issues. I am just a bird, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. In Chapter 2, during the ride on the Ferris wheel, Noelle confides in Susie saying how the sensation of fear can also make her feel comforted. Your parents are one of the first pieces of exposure you have to life itself, and your relationship with them typically dictates how you develop relationships with other people as you live on. Psychologists have understood this for years. If you have issues with your parents, they may lead to relationship issues with your spouses. What I'm trying to elaborate on is the fact of how incredibly fearful Noelle is of Carol. Sure, you can argue that Susie being there is a factor in Noelle's fear, like she doesn't want her mother to hate Susie or something like that. It would seem this reaction from Noelle is made to imply an avoidance due to fear. Fear of Carol, fear of her mother, one of her primary caregivers. When you are this young, this is when everything is being developed. Your sense of self, your self-esteem, self-identity, the works. This association of fear from a primary caregiver is most certainly a cause of Noelle's seemingly paradoxical comfort attained from frightening situations. Your parents should be your first introduction to compassion and comfort, so when your source of that also makes you afraid, it's no surprise that those emotions can become intertwined. For this next section, I wanted to talk about the Christmas theme which has surrounded the Holiday family for as long as we can remember. This was a narrative choice, and while it could be as simple as Toby Fox enjoys Christmas, I think it's worth a look. Welcome to my ho-ho home. Okay, calm down. Christmas is a widely celebrated holiday. Synonymous with Christianity, it is a holiday in which people exchange gifts. Other cultures celebrate Christmas, but it is primarily followed by those of Christian faith. The date of December 25th is regarded as the day in which Jesus of Nazareth was born. This date was decided on, even though nobody knows for sure that this was the date this happened. Christmas carries numerous varied meanings depending on who you ask, but truly the spirit of Christmas is something that people understand as an idea. The idea of family gatherings, friends exchanging gifts, feasting, singing, partying, all that stuff. Now, does that happen in every family? No, not everyone experiences Christmas in the same way. The important thing to remember is that Christmas is an idea, an emotion, something that everyone has an understanding of, yet when this idea is applied to reality, the truth might be less than ideal. From the outside, the Holiday family seems to be nice and stable, a perfect nuclear family. Mom, dad, and 2 beautiful kids. They live in a big, expensive house, the mother is in a place of power, and her image is definitely a factor in how she presents herself. The exact time of year in which Deltarune takes place is never explained, however, I don't get the feeling that it actually takes place during winter time. None of the other houses have Christmas lights. and there is not a single flake of snow which has fallen since the game has begun. The rainy section in Chapter 4, as well as the orange leaves, would lead me to believe the game actually takes place more closer to autumn. Not far away from winter, but you can probably see where I'm going with this. Noelle's family celebrates Christmas every day throughout the year, and while the town might not be on board with this has become an intrinsic part of the family's personality, and I think I know why. Perception, how the holidays are perceived by the town. On the outside, they are a happy, cooperative family perfectly emulating the holiday cheer we all know and remember. However, beyond the veil, they are broken. Rudolph, the father, is suffering from a debilitating disease, slowly sapping away his strength. The eldest daughter has disappeared, and it doesn't seem like anyone is even looking for her. Undine, the current chief of police, constantly references how boring everything is. It's almost like she isn't even trying to find December. You would think looking for the mayor's daughter would put some pep in her step, but she would rather play in traffic. It's almost as if she doesn't need to look for December, or, a little bit more scary, she was told not to. Noelle, the youngest, is doing great in school, or rather, she is being emotionally dragged along by an annoying bluebird who uses her to keep himself at the top of the class grades. Carol ignores or remains ignorant to all of these problems, and I truly think it's simply to preserve her family image. Be the holidays. Embody the holidays. Nothing to see here, no discourse, everything is fine. My daughter Noelle is doing great in school, and she's looking to go to the festival with that nice Birdly boy. What a lovely hetero relationship my daughter is in. Okay, that last one was a little bit assumptive, but you get the idea. Carol is much more like the main cast than we initially thought. She is trying to escape the harsh truths of her life, maintaining the happy family persona by any means necessary. What has caused this family to break apart? What is the very thing the family is trying to avoid thinking about? To understand that, we need to backpedal to Chapter 3. The Night. As far as we know, the Night is the final challenge for our protagonists. They are the main villain of the story, and they seem to have a plan in which has already been set into motion. This conversation will mostly ignore the meta assumption that the Knight will be redeemed by the end of the game, mostly because this video is a product of the time in which it was released. While there is definitely a chance their actions could be retroactively explained, for now we will simply call it as we see it. The Knight is a villain. But who are they? The Knight has been referenced by several boss characters. First it was the King, who followed the Knight blindly, trusting them to lead the Darkners to salvation. Having felt the Darkners have been abandoned by the Lightners, the King aggrandized the Knight, making them the prime motivation for his actions. With Chapter 4, it is revealed that the King actually never even met the Knight, only assuming who they were, totally ignorant to the fact that the Knight was actually a Lightner. Queen continues this trend. While her plans were for world domination, she was equally ignorant to the Knight's true intentions. Even when directly asked why she would want the roaring to happen, she responds with hilarious confusion. Then there's Tenna, the forgotten TV who is desperately trying to reclaim the Lightner's attention. Tenna explains that the Knight has promised him everything he wanted, and in return, all he would have to do is keep the Lightners distracted. At least, that is what we are told. This is based on what Tenna says. However, now that the new chapters have been out for a while and I have had time to think about this more, I think this might not be how things went down. So, if you do the sword route, at the very end, right before you fight Eram, you catch up with Tenna. Tenna talks to Chris, assuming they are alone together, and mentions this deal that they had together. We can make the assumption that Chris is working with the Knight in some capacity, as if you manage to beat them, they literally knight Chris. But here's the thing. Given the previous history with the holidays, as well as how cordial Carol Holiday acted towards Chris, you could make the assumption that they are all working together. Or, at the very least, Carol is working in tandem with Chris as well. That, combined with the fact that it was Chris who made the Chapter 3 Dark World, I do not believe Tenna actually met the Knight either. The timelines just don't match up. Unless the knight somehow swung by Chris's house in chapter 1 or 2 when the family was away, there is no way the knight could have spoken with Tenna. But you know who could have relayed the information? Chris. Chris made the Dark World, and right then they could have explained everything to Tenna. This is the deal that Tenna is talking about. Chris either pretended to be or genuinely relayed information from the knight to Tenna. Not only does this make so much more sense logistically, it actually makes sense when comparing the two other bosses. King and Queen never met the knight, but Tenna somehow did, even though it would have made so much more sense for Chris to just relay the information to Tenna, saying that the knight could give Tenna what he wanted. Without an actual explanation from the knight, we can't say for sure. I just think it makes so much more sense that Chris relayed the information rather than the knight somehow telling Tenna what to do. Because, you know, the knight would have to already be at the Dreamer house to tell Tenna to stall them, and if they were already at the house, then yeah, you get the idea. Regardless of who the knight is working with, they have a plan, and I have no idea what it is. I have no idea what the knight is trying to do. They aren't trying to cause the roaring. If they were, they would have done so in chapter 2 at the latest. All you need to do to cause it, apparently, is to have determination and open up 2 dark worlds in the same area within a very reasonable amount of time. Whatever the knight is planning, it requires some level of dark world shenanigans, but the roaring is not their end goal. The dark worlds need to be opened, but it's okay if they're closed as long as the Lighteners don't find out what you are actually planning. I have no idea what the knight wants, so I am forced to theorize what they want based on who they are, which, as you probably guessed, is a topic I have been procrastinating. The identity of the knight is beneficial if not mandatory for ascertaining the intentions and motivations of the previously mentioned. This is a topic I have been neglecting thus far as it is incredibly contentious. I believe the best way to argue my stance on who the knight is to take you on a journey of my thought process as I played the game. Naturally, you are obliged to believe whoever you want is the knight. However, I hope after I explain my thought process, it will become clear why I believe my conclusion is correct and why I believe other conclusions are wrong. Prior to physically seeing the knight, pretty much anyone could have been a candidate. Comparing the size of the knight is difficult as they are always floating in the air, and I'm almost certain their darkness form gives them some kind of bulk up, as in they're larger than they normally would be. Even when comparing the knight to the tallest of Deltarune characters, they're still pretty massive. However, I would like to point out that some of the tallest characters are from the Holiday family. As you probably guessed, I'm pointing that out for a reason. Before I even knew the shadowy figure was the knight, the first thing I noticed was the antlers. The antlers are distinct, and they now make this list of candidates a lot shorter. Clear as day, the antlers immediately place the knight as some kind of deer monster. And so far, we only know of 4 of them. Of course, this is all assuming that the physical form of the knight is not a red herring. But I have to admit, if the antlers were put on the knight as a red herring, that would be pretty lame. Withholding information to keep people guessing is fine, but I'm not a fan of the game outright lying to us for the sake of leading us down a wrong rabbit hole. I like to think that Toby Fox is a good sport, and even if someone somehow managed to guess the entirety of Deltarune's plot, he wouldn't make changes just to deny that person the ability to say they were right. The knight appears, and then they hold out their hand, to which a solid black shape takes form. This black shape is cylindrical, and it appears to have a blunt tip, making it look very similar to a baseball bat. This baseball bat looking shape is what then becomes the knight's sword. The only other character thus far that has been referenced to use or play with a baseball bat is December Holiday, the only character in this lineup that is unaccounted for. I can still remember when my original Noelle video dropped, there were quite a few people who said that it was obvious that the baseball moon in Noelle's room was a representation of December, her sister. While I didn't notice the connection back then, I absolutely do now. The physical aspects of the knight, the fact that the weapon they use looks an awful lot like a baseball bat, and the fact that December Holiday has been unaccounted for a very long time, makes it insurmountably clear that the knight is none other than December Holiday. Now, of course, at this point in the story, you could argue that the knight is Carol or Rudy, and I will address those arguments now. There are several reasons why it just has to be December. Some of them are factual, some thematic, and some meta. Since the meta reasons are technically the weakest, I'll start with those. To start, the sheer action of holding up this object that looks like a baseball bat, that didn't need to happen. Like, the knight did not have to do that. They could have just unsheathed the sword quickly and then started the battle, but they didn't. Toby Fox saw fit to have this moment of silence. It's roughly 3 seconds, not long enough to upset the pacing of the scene, but it is long enough to make sure that the audience can see it. This, along with all of the other hints that December was a baseball enthusiast, is reason enough to assume that this was a telegraph, a message for the audience member that was paying extra attention thus far, like us. This reason is meta. I am using my knowledge of how stories are told to argue this point. This baseball bat was a detail that the writer wanted us to take note of, as it is something we can reference later to support why it ended up being December. The reason why I'm saying the meta arguments are not the best is because I'm technically gambling here. I'm assuming that in the near future, this scene in particular is going to be looked back on when people think about why the night was December. Essentially, I'm banking on something to happen in the future that explains the somewhat unorthodox nature of this scene. Okay, now for some factual reasons. The antlers, like previously mentioned, are undeniable. When a Lightner enters the Dark World, their appearance changes, but not entirely. Chris and Susie experience a change in color palette, and their clothes technically change, but they still have the same silhouette. The only Lightners we know of that have antlers would be the Holidays. And now I will address the possibility that the knight is in fact Carol or Rudy. In Chapter 4, Rudy has been seen to be mobile, but considering he is supposed to be hospitalized, he could not leave the hospital without people taking issue with it. Rudy is the hospital's responsibility, and they wouldn't just let a patient who was incredibly weak out more than was absolutely necessary. The only reason he was able to attend church is because it was for both religious and family reasons. And I would like to point out that after church, he went right back to the hospital, because he was most likely required to do so by the hospital. If Rudy goes missing, the hospital is liable for that. And considering Rudy is married to the literal mayor of hometown, it is in the doctor's best interest to keep a close watch on Rudy to make sure that he is not hurt. And of course, there's the more obvious reason why he can't be the knight, that being his illness. Rudy is ill, so Dark World or not, he would not have the strength to fight the Lightners at the capacity that the knight does. I'll briefly mention this. There's this idea floating around that Rudy is faking his illness, and I'm not interested in entertaining that idea whatsoever. Moving on to Carol, I will admit it is more difficult to argue, except for the fact that she is seen at the Holiday Mansion, where after we leave, she is presumably still there, grilling Noelle for allowing Susie to touch December's guitar. It is not impossible for Carol to sprint over to the church before Susie and Chris get there. However, everything about how Carol was acting would imply that she was staying for at least a while to reprimand or even punish Noelle. Carol's status in hometown is another big reason why she just couldn't be the knight. Much like how the hospital must be held accountable for Rudy's location, Carol, being the town's mayor, would have to be in touch with at least a handful of town officials and residents. Hometown is a smaller place, so naturally she wouldn't have a bunch of work to do. There would most certainly be issues and disputes that Carol would have to deal with on the daily. Finally, December being the knight would make the most sense thematically. December is missing, at least that's what we've been told, but what if she just wasn't? What if instead something happened to her that would have ruined the established, well-balanced family that the Holidays were? Carol cannot do anything about Rudy's condition. At least, not yet. The jury is still out on whether or not the Dark Worlds can cure illnesses. The shelter appears to be their base of operations. What if December didn't go missing? What if she was changed? Changed by something Chris did, or something they were gaslit into thinking was their fault? This could very well be the promise that Carol and Chris made. Save December, either from herself or change her back to the way things were. Several people cared about December. Noelle, Rudolph, Azrael, Chris's older brother, and of course, Chris themselves. Azrael and December had something. Was it serious? Maybe. But regardless, they were close, and Chris is more than likely thinking about how sad Azrael was when December went missing. If Chris could help Carol get her daughter back, help December get herself back, then that would make everyone happy again. And maybe, just maybe, help everyone get back together again, just like the good old days. That's what Chris wants. Are they misguided? Yeah. Will they continue down this path at the cost of their own health? Unfortunately. Despite what I have said about Carol, I do think she cares about her daughter. Yeah, she values her image a little bit too much, but there is a sense of love and maybe even some guilt on her part too. I think the undeniable truth that we may have to face come the end of this tale is that December will have to die. This is the undeniable reality that I think Carol and Chris are trying to escape. All things must come to an end, even our loved ones. And even though we can use any means to ignore or escape reality, there is no denying it. The Dark Worlds were able to resurrect Gerson Boom, but he went away as soon as the Dark World was closed. Just as Gerson accepted his fate, I think December will be the one to accept this as well. Perhaps this is how the story will end. In a moment of clarity, the Night will cast away their disguise and allow themselves to fade away completely. The Night will finally accept their fate. Even though it's not fair or even their fault, they will accept it. Before moving on, I want to quickly address Papyrus Night Theory. Okay, listen. Every night theory has its own level of validity. Papyrus Night Theory is valid. I just don't think it is as valid as December Night Theory. I'm sure there are plenty of people who still believe in Papyrus Night, and that's perfectly fine. December Night Theory is what I believe in, and that is why I spent so much time arguing that that theory was correct. There's definitely something going on with Papyrus, right? There's a very good reason why we haven't seen him thus far, but it's that exact reason why it would kinda be a little weird if he did end up being the Knight. Like, pretty much everyone in the main cast has no idea who Papyrus is. We know him because we played Undertale, but the main cast doesn't. It's totally possible to tell a compelling story without having the protagonist and the antagonist knowing each other. However, if it was December, it would offer so much more emotional turmoil between the characters. Chris and Noelle have a long-standing history with December, so if they were ever forced to fight December, that would be so much more emotionally striking. If it ended up being Papyrus, it would just be like a Scooby-Doo situation. Not even, they would just take off the mask and be like, ah, it's a skeleton. Which, yeah, that would be pretty funny, but you understand what I'm trying to say. Moving on. Hey everyone, welcome to the community section that I totally didn't do at the very end because I totally didn't forget to do it. Things are a bit different this time around as we have way more YouTube comment submissions than Discord submissions. Maybe the reason there's a lot more YouTube comment submissions is because I actually told people to format their comments so I can actually find them. Because there's less of them, we'll start with the Discord submissions. This first one comes from Divin. Okay, this first one briefly mentions that at one point Noelle had a goth or emo phase, naturally referring to the photograph you can find in Chapter 4. So there's actually a little bit about this from the Spamton sweepstakes as well, if I remember correctly. There was a point in time where Caddy and Noelle would hang out together a lot, and I think that might have stopped right around the same time that Susie moved to hometown. Judging by everything we know now, I think Noelle and Caddy had a very close relationship, and as a result, Noelle decided to take on some of Caddy's aesthetics. Caddy could be described as goth, wearing a lot of black makeup and being interested in the occult, things like that. This aesthetic choice could have also been inspired by December. Obviously we haven't seen December yet, but based on how her room looks, you could make the assumption that occasionally she would wear some black makeup. A lot of this aesthetic would actually clash with how Noelle is seen now, and I think the reason why she doesn't dress like this anymore could be a couple of reasons. The first reason, I think it could be her mother forbids her from doing that. And since, as we already talked about, Noelle's afraid of her mother, she doesn't want to upset her, so she obliges. And also, there's the possibility that she doesn't dress like that anymore because it reminds her of Des. A small idea, but still very interesting. Thank you for your submission, Divin. Next submission comes from Shy. This submission is technically a theory, but also it's more of a prediction. Essentially, Shay predicts that Noelle will make a return to the Dark World adventures in Chapter 5. and her role in the dark world might change depending on what route we are playing. The Spamton Sweepstakes is mentioned. If you don't remember, in the Spamton Sweepstakes, there is a page that contains the numbers 1 through 5. If you click on number 2, it'll take you to a page that has the song that plays right before you use Snowgrave. If you click on the number 3, it'll take you to a page that plays the sound that ERAM makes when they fly away. If you click on the number 4, it'll show you the red dot that can also be seen at the end of the Weird Route Chapter 4. And if you click on number 5, it plays this song. The song is played on a guitar, which could more than likely be from December's guitar. Some people have speculated that because there is no 6 and 7, that means that the Weird Route will end in Chapter 5. But Shy does not believe this. They believe that Chapter 5's Weird Route will be a sort of calm before the storm. Overall, the theory is that Noelle will appear in the light world and the dark world, and of course the natural continuation would be that we learn more about Des as a result. Thank you for your submission, Shy. Okay, now moving on to the YouTube comment submissions. First YouTube submission comes from MOCHA, and it's Noelle's neat nuggets. Damn it, I said no alliteration. Thank you for your submission. Next submission comes from Nature Lull. Really, this isn't a theory as much as it's a thought process of sorts. They start off by questioning the idea of the Weird Route itself, more specifically the intentions of the player. The Weird Route section will come right after this, so I'll explain my thoughts on that there. A lot of the submission questions the reasoning behind the actions taken within the Weird Route, like why are we given 2 options and why is there only those options? I noticed this too. During this very uncomfortable scene, you have the ability to stop by choosing very specific dialogue options. Even with all the scary music and such, you can just say it's a prank and Noelle will just buy it. However, eventually you get to the point where it doesn't matter what you choose, the events are now set into motion. You are choosing to do this for a reason. The reason would differ from player to player, and I just think it's interesting that when you get to a certain point, curious or not, your choice is taken away, and now you have to make Noelle re-equip the ring. Nature continues, bringing up Noelle's own interest in exhausting a video game of all its secrets. In the Spamton Sweepstakes, she would hatch pets, remove pets again and again, and oh how the turntables, she now is a game glitch herself. She is being exploited by a player that just wants to see what happens. Obviously, I'm not arguing that she deserves any of this. What I am saying is that Noelle could be considered a completionist, someone who pushes things just to see what happens. And that could be one of many reasons she has been targeted by the player to carry out this route. Thank you for your submission, Nature Lull. This next one is on the shorter side. Nicole wants to hear my thoughts on the trans Noelle theory. If you're not familiar, the theory states that Noelle is trans because she has antlers, which are more associated with male deer, thus being trans femme. A few things I should mention: female reindeer also have antlers, it's not something that only male reindeer have. Female deer, also known as does, do not typically have antlers, so this is why the assumption was made. This information, along with the introduction of Noelle Holiday, another character who uses she/her pronouns, and has antlers, would lead me to believe that this theory was not the writer's intention. However, Noelle's room is filled with bright pinks, bright blues, and whites, which are the colors of the trans flag. So, you know what? Even if it wasn't their initial intention, I don't think the devs take issue with this theory at all. I mean, if you think about it, you could argue that they're actually encouraging it. My personal thoughts on this: if I were to look into this as a real-world situation, it's none of my business if Noelle is trans or not. That's her business, and it's her choice whether or not she wants anyone to know. She wants to be called she/her, so that's what everyone calls her. That's who she wants to be, and that's all I need to know. Obviously, if she was a real person and wanted to share her thoughts on the subject, I'd be down to listen. Antlers or not, it's not entirely impossible for Noelle to be trans. It's really just up to her if she wants to share that with other people. Thank you for your submission, Nicole. Marna63 writes about a topic that admittedly I never considered until now. That of which being that Noelle could be potentially ignoring her thoughts on December. We see glimpses of this in the spelling bee, where she collapses when the word December is chosen. It seems as though there is a part of Noelle that has attempted to stop thinking about Des, and I think Carol may have something to do with this. If you try to enter December's room while exploring with Noelle, she will say that you are not allowed to go in. When Carol takes back December's guitar, Noelle acts like she's in trouble, as if she's broken some kind of rule. I think a lot of Noelle's behavior towards the memory of deaths are caused by her mother. I think there's this sentiment from her that talking about December or touching December's things is not allowed whatsoever. Marna's interpretation of this is that Noelle doesn't want to end up like the rest of those who are searching for her. She sees what the research for deaths has done to Chris, Asgore, and Carol and doesn't want to lose herself in the search compared to them. I will say, inversely to this idea, I don't think Noelle is aware of the actions of those characters, as I am in the camp that Noelle is unaware of what these characters are doing. I feel like Noelle is kept in the dark on most things, so as a result, she wouldn't be aware of all of the extents that these characters are going for to search for December. Thank you for submitting your idea, Marna. Next, we have an idea from Gale5841, in which Noelle's relationship with Susie could be what changes the prophecy towards the end of the game. The colors of pink and gold have come up more than once, and these are both colors that appear in Noelle and Susie Pink and Noelle Gold. Without knowing the exact significance of these colors, it's hard to say what the correlation is. However, it is very likely that Noelle possesses incredible powers just like Susie. Whether or not she has the power to change how the game works like Susie does remains to be seen. But I have a feeling there is more than one reason why the player has targeted her in the weird route. Determination is the running theory for how Susie can do the things she does, and that determination has more than likely been growing since those around her have made her more hopeful for the future. Emotions are synonymous with intent, and Susie intends to protect the people she cares about no matter what the prophecy says. And considering Noelle is included in that, you could say that Noelle is one of the reasons why the prophecy will be changed. Personally, I think the prophecy has been changed already, but we'll just have to see about that. Thank you, Gale. Epic Creepa actually gives me the chance to correct something that I previously got wrong. They bring up something I said about Rousey in the Susie video, which I forgot to clarify. In the Susie video, I made the claim that Rousey was humming Gaster's theme because, well, to me, the songs sound exactly the same, but they were actually not. The song in which Susie says that Rousey was humming earlier was actually Dark Sanctuary, the main theme of Chapter 4's Dark World, not Gaster's theme. It would seem that more so, this was so the audience would realize that Rousey can hear the background music of each world, and Susie somehow cannot. This could just be a facet of how Rousey has greater knowledge, or, even more interestingly, the reason why Susie cannot hear background music is because she is not directly part of the game. Anyways, sorry, I just wanted to clarify that mistake I made. Thank you, Epic Creepa. Memes Arkeem comes to us with some Deltarune shower thoughts. Concerning the Knight, they compared the idea that I posed in the Rousey video concerning how he disguises himself using pure darkness. I have come to the conclusion that his form is malleable and his body could morph and change any way he sees fit, which is why he can fill up an entire horse costume by himself. Memes is saying that the Knight could very well do the same thing. While a Lightner has not been known to be able to change their appearance in the Dark World in any drastic way, I don't think the Knight could be considered a regular Lightner. They can open up their chest, they can morph into a ball and fly around. I think their form is more malleable than others, and the darkness around them makes them more indistinct. A solid theory. Thank you for your submission, meme. Cody58274 poses the idea that you may all be familiar with when it comes to theorizing about the weird route. There is some kind of influence that is being passed from the player to Noelle, and while I can't say for sure we will be trading vessels, it is possible that we are adding Noelle to the fold. The weird route carries with it a foreboding sense of control. We are enforcing our control over Noelle to make her do things she wouldn't normally do. Snowgrave was just the start. As I'll talk about later, I think Noelle would make a deviously perfect bargaining chip to use against people. If we could control Noelle the same way we do Chris, then we could potentially make other people do what we wanted by holding her hostage. I wouldn't say we would transfer the soul completely though. If you remember, after we force Noelle to re-equip the Thorn Ring, Chris goes into a frenzy, giving us that two-piece combo no biscuit treatment. Looking into the menu right after, we can see that we took damage from that beatdown too. If we do transfer to Noelle, we would have to be careful because any damage done to us would be inflicted on the other person too. So I can't see the soul being directly transferred, considering that the player in the weird route would have their own sense of self-preservation. Thank you, Cody. Squid Soldier 1155 writes about a theory they've been thinking about regarding when Des disappeared. The theory revolves around what might have happened to Chris, which made them agree to this deal with Carol. Chris feels guilt. This is a reasonable conclusion that a lot of people have come to, and this guilt would not be felt if Chris did not have some hand in Des's disappearance. Whether it was Des who offered to put herself into harm's way to save Chris or some other circumstance, I think the crutch of this is Chris feels guilty for what happened, and that guilt is being used to coerce Chris into doing what they are doing. The memory of what happened could also be the memories that Chris has forgotten, represented by the man behind the tree from the egg rooms. This theory is interesting as it contextualizes the man as something Chris cannot remember for whatever reason. I personally interpreted the man as a literal man from Chris's past, perhaps their biological father or even their therapist. There are aspects of Chris's past that they are either trying to forget or can't remember due to some kind of mental block, which seems paradoxical because they are also trying to rekindle the nostalgic feelings of family from their past as well. Thank you, Squid Soldier, and thank you for your kind words. Good luck on your pilgrimage. Our final submission comes from Cloudy Days, and they describe this theory as completely baseless, which the best theories usually are, so this is going to be awesome. They believe that freezing enemies is more of a benevolent action than previously thought. I think what they might be trying to say is that freezing a darkener could be a way of preserving them, potentially protecting them from the roaring should it happen. Honestly, as backwards as this theory might sound, it has some potential validity. Rouse explains that when the roaring happens, the darkeners will turn to stone no matter what, under the crushing weight of the darkness. If a darkener is turned to ice beforehand, technically they would be preserved or even protected by the crushing darkness. This theory would naturally have to rely on the weird route being a more pragmatic path than one that was pure evil. I would say this theory has a chance. However, with the existence of certain dialogue options in the weird route, I can't say for sure that this is the case. There are dialogue options to encourage Noelle to do more morally dubious things she wouldn't normally do. In Chapter 2, she gets the idea of stepping off the button to allow Chris to be electrocuted, and we have the ability to encourage this, even though this dialogue isn't necessary to continue the weird route. This is what really holds back the weird route from being a more pragmatic path. Overall, the theory is pretty interesting. Thank you, Cloudy Days, and thank you to everyone who submitted their ideas. Okay, after a big interlude, we can finally get back to Noelle. Building off of the events of the weird routes beginning in Chapter 2, Chapter 4 sort of maintains it. Contrary to what we thought was going to happen, the focus is maintained on Noelle. After we coerced Noelle into using Snowgrave on Birdley, he was left in a critical state, unconscious and unresponsive. Noelle assumes that everything was a dream, but inversely, this notion is corrected by us. Throughout the events of the weird route, I have noticed a few trends. We are focusing on Noelle, making her the focal point of the story, putting much more narrative weight into her than anything else. As a result, Chris and Susie do not have the chance to develop as strong of a friendship as they normally would. We also seem to be going off the intended path of the narrative as characters with greater foresight like Rouse mention how unexpected certain story events are. Things are being pushed into a different direction, and with the weird route events of Chapter 4, it has become abundantly clear that Noelle is the key. In between chapters, Chris makes the journey to Noelle's house, removes the thorn ring, and reassures her that everything was simply a dream. When we, the player, find out about this, we seize control of Chris and force Noelle to re-equip the ring while informing her that what she did was real. So, when talking about the weird route, I need to speak in a hypothetical context, because we don't have the full context yet. A few people had trouble with my weird route video I released a few months ago. Some people just didn't understand what I meant when I said this hypothetical version of the player. So I'll clarify this now. When we play the weird route of Deltarune in Chapter 4, we take control of Chris, tell Noelle that what happened was not a dream, and we force her to re-equip the thorn ring, piercing her finger in the process. If you do anything besides that, it is considered an unsuccessful weird route. Do you know why we did all that? Do you know the exact reason why we made Noelle re-equip the thorn ring? No. No, of course not. That is why we are theorizing about it right now. However, the player, at this point in the story has a reason, because otherwise they wouldn't do this. We wouldn't do this. The weird route is meant to be played after the normal route, or at the very least something you find after exploring the game profusely. There is a reason why the player needs Noelle to have the Thorn Ring. I most certainly don't want Noelle to have the Thorn Ring because it causes her great pain and it makes her and Chris upset. So therefore, there is hypothetically a version of the player that does, and that person is not me. So I have to think about why someone would want to do that. What is that player's plan? I'm sorry to those of you who were already on the same page. It's just kind of weird that some people in the comment section of that video were just like, what do you mean the player? We are the player. Like they just don't understand that every player will have different intentions when playing Deltarune. So now hopefully we are all on the same page and we can talk about why Noelle of all people carries such narrative significance. I already went over most of this in the Weird Route video. I'll go over it again now, but if you want to watch it, it's right there. Oh, watch out, now it's over there. Oh, that's over there. Oh, yeah, come on, you gotta be quicker than that. Oh, it's over there. Oh, go get it. Oh, you almost had it. Oh, careful, don't pause the video now. I guess there, I'll stop messing around. It's right there. So basically, my thought process on the Weird Route so far is that there are 2, possibly 3 factions currently operating in the game's story. You have the Night side, which is kinda unconfirmed, but for the sake of argument, we'll just assume that this faction consists of Carol, Asgore, December, and Chris. Maybe more. But also, I should mention that not everyone in this faction is aware of the others' involvement. Then there's the Hero faction, consisting of Rousey, Susie, all the Darkners in Castletown, the player, if it's the normal route, and also Chris, because you know, Chris is playing both sides right now. The third potential faction would be Friend and Eram, some kind of wildcard faction of particularly strong Darkners who may come up later. But for now, we'll just ignore them. The hypothetical version of the player we are talking about has a plan. Whether they thought up this plan from playing the Sword Route in Chapter 3 or from later events in the story, they have a plan. However, to enact this plan, they need to take into consideration these 2 opposing factions. Based on all of the information we have right now, my current conclusion is that this player wants to take back control of the narrative from Susie. To do that, they need leverage over Susie, and of course, they will also need leverage over the Knight, the other powerful character who can stop them. As of right now, the Knight and Susie are the 2 most powerful characters in the canon. We defeat the Knight, but they just say no. We want to go with Rousey, but Susie says no. I'm taking Rousey and I'm in control of this narrative. Screw you, player. Even though both of these powerful characters are at odds with each other, there is one character who they both value tremendously. Noelle. Pretty much everyone in the narrative values Noelle no matter what side they're on. The player knows this, so as a result, they have targeted Noelle specifically. Her close bond with all of the other characters makes her the perfect bargaining chip should either side seek to fight us. At present moment, the player has coerced Noelle into using Snowgrave on Birdly, and despite her attempts to repress it, the player keeps goading her. There are dialogue options in Chapter 2 where you can encourage Noelle to be more selfish or aggressive in her actions. For lack of a better word, the player is attempting to corrupt Noelle, make her more open to the idea of hurting people. If we could get her to attack Birdly in such a short amount of time, then after a while we could get her to attack Susie as well. Now, one would think that everything is said and done, but now of course we return to the question, why is Noelle all that matters? While yes, I see Noelle playing a big role in the Weird Route, I cannot see her carrying the same weight in the normal route. Definitely no more narrative weight than Susie. I mean, she carries the Pen of Hope. Why would Noelle matter more than Susie? Unless there is something about her that we haven't been told yet. Perhaps we are in for a big surprise and Noelle has some kind of special property about herself that makes her exceptionally powerful. Perhaps Noelle also has the power to change how the game works, and like Susie, she just hasn't realized it yet. Maybe the answer is a lot more simple. Maybe it's simply the fact that she can use ice magic. When discussing Noelle and the Weird Route, her own interest in video games is often brought up. Noelle enjoys looking for game glitches and exploits. and as it turns out, her ice magic might be one of them. Darkness and darkness have been compared to water time and time again throughout the story. The nexus from which darkness flows is literally called a dark fountain. Darkness acts as a liquid, so ice magic inherently has the power to freeze it. When you think about it, if all darkness are made of darkness, and darkness takes on the properties of liquid water, Noelle has the ability to counter any darkner, even the Titans. Noelle's ice magic is an exploit. It's like dummy overpowered when you think about it. If we made Noelle strong enough, I wonder if she would have enough power to one-shot a Titan. Titans, as strong as they are, would be made of pure darkness, just like the dark fountains. Perhaps this utility does come up later in the normal route, and if Noelle was stronger when the roaring does happen, she could have been used to stop the Titans. That all makes perfect sense. Noelle's ice magic is an incredibly powerful tool that can be used to stop the Titans and the Knight. Her connection with every major character makes her the perfect bargaining chip, and really the question turns to, how will Noelle react going forward? So, here's the thing.
It's clobbering time.
But also, here's why I think Noelle is all that matters. Throughout the majority of this video, I've been talking about Noelle's mother doing this, or the player manipulates Noelle to do that. But for anything to happen in this story, whether weird route or not, Noelle has the power to end this. Almost every character sources Noelle as their motivation for why they do what they do. But what is Noelle's motivation? What is her decision? What is her choice? The weird route has something going on with the Thorn Ring. It is expanding the player's influence to Noelle, but as we learned with Susie, that influence is worthless if you simply decide to stop listening to it. Once Noelle learns of our presence, she would need to be culpable in whatever action takes place going forward. As of right now, you could say we tricked her into attacking Birdley, but that's because she thought everything was a dream. In both routes, Noelle is gaining knowledge, reassessing her memory of what happened, and I think it falls to her to decide who she will help in the coming conflict. Noelle is so used to just turning away, allowing other people to make decisions for her, but Susie has been desperately trying to spark something inside her, make her realize that her decision matters. Noelle matters. Noelle is all that matters, and when she realizes that she is stronger than she knows, her ice powers are what I believe will stop the roaring. In the weird route, the player has recognized this, and they are using her ice powers as a weapon to fit their needs. But still, Noelle is all that matters. Her decision matters. She can resist the player's influence. And all we can really hope for is that Noelle realizes that she has a choice come the end of the weird route. She can resist. She can say no if she wants to. Same with the normal route. Her mother is planning something, striving for something. She wants her perfect family back by any means necessary. But that idea is just an idea. It was never real. There was never this perfect family. There was only what Carol wanted to believe. Bringing December back won't change that. It falls to Noelle because she is all that matters. Her choice will help decide the outcome of the narrative. Why do you think the player is trying so hard to control her? I just hope when the time comes, she will make the right decision. Thank you all so much for watching. Goodbye. I would like to thank all of the Nighthawk channel members. Thank you Lilico. Thank you Bleed4MBG. Thank you Vantum253. Thank you Arlindos24. Thank you all so much.